So remember when you were a kid and you got an ice cream cone and it dropped to the cement right as you licked it? That's how it must feel today to be a Democrat.
Thank God.
Here you think Mr. Comey was going to deliver Donald Trump on an edible platter, and instead you get Loretta Lynch.
Hold it now.
Fired FBI Director James Comey finally got around to testifying before Congress this morning, the most anticipated moment so far in this endless Russia investigation. The hearing lasted 4 exhausting hours, but that was just the beginning. The analysis is next. The partisan lying, the moral preening, the purely unsupported speculative BS you see run on a continuous loop on the screen. That'll no doubt go on for weeks, if not years, as each faction tries to get the jump on writing its version of history. Our advice, approach it all with skepticism. There's an awful lot of propaganda out there.
Extraordinary testimony today from fired FBI Director James Comey, flat out calling President Trump a liar.
Comey calling the president and his White House team liars on several occasions.
James Comey called the president, used the actual word lie or lying or liar.
The former FBI director told the world today that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, cannot be trusted.
Yes, and this is important. He made clear that the president personally was not under investigation when Comey was fired in May. However, Comey accused the president of lying about why he fired him.
But Comey's comments are breathing new life into some uncomfortable questions, such as whether there's a taping system here at the White House and whether the president is a liar.
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorically?
You are fake news.
We are at the darkest moment in the history of representative government in this country. James Comey has now implied under oath that the President of the United States is being investigated by the Justice Department for possible collusion with the Russian government in tampering with the 2016 election, and that the President of the United States is also being investigated for possible obstruction of justice. Comey said none of these things so starkly nor directly in his testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee.
All those leaks you've been reading about lately, at least one of them came from the director of the FBI himself. We know this because Comey admitted it. After being fired, Comey concedes he sent a memo describing a meeting he'd had with the president to a friend of his, who then gave it to the New York Times. Comey explained he did this to try to force the appointment of a special prosecutor.
It didn't dawn on me originally that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Well, second, we learned that many of the other leaks and big scoops from major news outlets are lies. In February, for example, the New York Times published a piece entitled "Trump Campaign Aides Had Repeated Contacts with Russian Intelligence," and it cited those ubiquitous current and former American officials you see quoted in virtually every story these days. According to Comey, the article was garbage.
That report by the New York Times was not true. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, in the main, it was not true. The people talking about it often don't really know what's going on, and those of us who actually know what's going on are not talking about it.
But that wasn't the only lie that made it into the news cycle recently. On Tuesday, CNN cited an unnamed source to claim that James Comey would deny ever telling President Trump he wasn't under investigation. Trump claimed that he told him that 3 times. CNN said that's not true. Well, less than a day later, the release of Comey's opening statement proved that to be laughably false. The obvious lesson here, nameless leakers, the group that's been responsible more than anyone else for fueling the past 7 months of media hysteria, often lie. And that makes sense. They're not giving their names for a reason. Maybe reporters ought to take that into account before acting as their stenographers.
Carl.
Who are the sources? Oh, because they're hiding behind this anonymity.
Oh,
and that's what we're seeing.
Please, do not even start with me that you're just going to attack sources.
Okay, so
that
what about,
is ridiculous.
so are you saying McMaster is lying?
I'm not saying McMaster is lying.
Well, he didn't really answer the question.
He didn't answer the question.
He said nothing inappropriate was shared.
No, that's his opinion.
That would be,
but that's his opinion.
You cannot say, you cannot attack.
Yeah.
Do not attack the stellar reporters of CNN.
We learned that the Russian collusion story, the one we've been force-fed by Democrats in the Congress and their handmaidens in the media for months now, is starting to look weaker than ever. The heart of this entire scandal, the reason we haven't been allowed to focus on the many actual problems in this country, is the claim that Donald Trump deliberately collaborated with Vladimir Putin's government in in order to win power and undermine America's own fundamental interests.
But the big story to me has always been, as all of us, and I think Nicole really touched on it there, the assumption of the critics of the president, of his pursuers, you might say, is that somewhere along the line in the last year, the president had something to do with colluding with the Russians, something to do with the helping hand, encouraging them, feeding their desire to affect the election in some way, some role they played, some conversation he had with Michael Flynn or Paul Manafort or somewhere. And yet what came apart this morning was that theory, because in two regards. The president said, according to the written testimony of Mr. Comey, go ahead and get anybody's satellite to my operation and nail them. I'm with you on that. So that would mean Manafort, Carter Page, someone else like that. And then he also came across what was fascinating. Comey said that basically Flynn wasn't central to the Russia investigation, that he was touching on it, that there was, of course, Flynn hadn't honest, we assume wasn't honest in his answering of the official forms that he had to fill out to become national security head. But it only touched on that it wasn't really related to that, but he could be flipped for that. But in other words, they could flip him because they had him caught on something he dishonestly answered, but he wasn't central, it seemed, to the Russian thing. And I've always assumed what Trump was afraid of, he had said something to Flynn, and Flynn could be flipped on that, and Flynn would testify against the president that he had had some conversation with Flynn in terms of dealing with the Russians affirmatively. And if that's not the case, where's the there there?
Investigating Hillary Clinton's private email server, Attorney General Loretta Lynch asked Comey to soft pedal what was actually happening. She instructed him to call the whole thing a matter rather than what it was, an investigation. Now, that's political pressure if there ever was such a thing, but Comey went along with it anyway.
We were getting to a place where the Attorney General and I were both going to have to testify and talk publicly about it, and I wanted to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter. It gave the impression that the Attorney General was looking to align the way we talked about our work with the way a political campaign was describing the same activity, which was inaccurate.
But wait, there's inconsistent behavior here. Why did Comey agree to make untrue statements that echoed the Clinton campaign's talking points? He just admitted he did that. And then refused to publicly say something completely true about President Trump, namely that he was not under investigation. Why did Comey make and then leak detailed memos about his meetings with President Trump, but apparently do nothing in response to the political pressure he received from the previous Attorney General, Loretta Lynch?
Lynch gave campaign language to Comey to cover up an investigation to help Hillary's campaign. That's inappropriate. We're talking Al Franken in a mesh thong. Inappropriate.
But not illegal.
Pass. True. And how great is it? This is wonderful. How great is it that Hillary is still causing the Democrats fits? The Loretta Lynch thing is only an issue because she had to deal with the Hillary matter. Hillary really is the Democrats' unrelenting mother-in-law who comes to visit when they least want her. So in a hearing meant to hammer Trump, the previous crew gets nailed. It's like when a stink bomb goes off before you have time to throw it. You end up smelling bad the rest of the day, which is what happened to Lynch, Hillary, and yes, even Comey. His decision to obey undermines this persona of a folksy everyman just trying to do his job, when it seemed he'd do just about anything to keep his job, including look the other way.